Good evening, everyone. I'm Toya Sosa, Associate Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Riverside Health System and one of your moderators tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I also thank those of you that are joining on Facebook and YouTube, and I encourage you to leave your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll get back to you with the answers to those. We at Riverside are honored to host this important conversation for Celebrate Diversity Month entitled Cultural Humility, Valuing and Respecting Differences Between and Within Cultures. We are also grateful for our sponsors, our partners rather, joining in on this discussion, Christopher Newport University, Hampton University, and Truist. This will be an in-depth discussion about personal experiences in the workplace and organizational strategies to build inclusive and equitable environments. Cultural humility influences how we are perceived and treated by people and systems. Before I get started with this conversation, let's get to know my co-moderator, who will then introduce our panelists. Vidal Dickerson is Special Assistant to the President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Christopher Newport University. Vidal's career spans over 20 years with diversity, equity, and inclusion work in higher education, medical education, and nonprofit organizations where he has coordinated strategic planning, learning and development, and community relations initiatives. Vidal serves on the Peninsula Board for the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. Vidal is also the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair for the Peninsula chapter of the Society for Human Resource Management. Please welcome my co-moderator for tonight's program, Vidal Dickerson.
Right. Thank you, Toya, for such a gracious introduction. It is certainly my pleasure to serve as co-moderator for this event, focusing on a timely and necessary topic, cultural humility. I trust that as the evening progresses, we will gain insights and strategies that will promote valuing and respecting cultures from both individual and organizational perspectives. Today, we will hear from a panel of proven leaders. Combined, these experts have over a century of experiences and perspectives that speak to serving and engaging diverse communities across a range of industries. So let's meet them. First, Dr. Felicia Blow. Dr. Felicia Blow is an award-winning leader with extensive organizational, fundraising, strategic planning, leadership, and management experience. With a 30-year career spanning work in manufacturing, waste management, and environmental services, telecommunications, and higher education. Dr. Blow currently serves as Associate Vice President for Development at the renowned historically Black institution, Hampton University. At Hampton, Dr. Blow led the university's $150 million dream, No Small Dreams, to campaign as its campaign director. That campaign concluded 2019 and exceeded its goal in raising more than $166 million in support of university priorities. Next, Jesse Goodrich. Jesse joined Riverside Health Systems in 2003 as Human Resources Assistant and quickly moved into the role as Senior Human Resources Coordinator. After station at Health South, now Encompass Health, in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Jesse returned to Riverside and eventually moved to the Vice President of Human Resources role in May 2018, and was promoted to Senior Vice President in September 2021. In her current role, Jesse oversees human resources, recruitment, benefits, compensation, workforce development, employee occupational health, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to her role at Riverside, she serves on the executive committee of the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and on the board of Goodwill of Central and Coastal Virginia, and on the board of the Institute for Dance in Williamsburg. She lives in Williamsburg, Virginia, with her husband and 3 daughters. Also, we have Dr. Mike Oshiki. Dr. Mike Oshiki is a native of Washington, D.C. During his 35-year Army career, Colonel Oshiki has served in a range of medical leadership capacities on every level, from battalion to corps, in both conventional and special operations units. Throughout his career, Dr. Oshiki has strived to practice full-spectrum family medicine and be involved in teaching and research, most recently serving on the teaching faculty of the Madigan Army Medical Center Family Medicine Residency. His final assignment prior to retirement was serving at the Pentagon as the Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Army for Health Affairs. In the spring of 2022, Dr. Oshiki retired from the Army and joined the Riverside Health Systems as the president of Riverside Regional Medical Center in Newport News. Dr. Oshiki and his wife, Ginger, live in Gloucester, I always mess that word up, I'm sorry,
Gloucester.
Gloucester Point, Virginia, and have 3 adult children living across the United States. In their free time, they enjoy cooking, hiking, travel to new places, and visiting with family and friends. And next, we have Jessica Macalino. Jessica currently serves as the Associate Vice President for Riverside Regional Medical Center in Newport News, Virginia, where she oversees various operational departments and laboratory services. For the past 11 years, Jessica's focus has largely been on strategic and programmatic development, process improvement, operational excellence, and provider development. She has a passion for developing strategic priorities that directly meet the needs of the community she serves. She also mentors and helps to develop future leaders in healthcare. Jessica was also named the 2022 VCU Health Administration's Young Professional of the Year for her continuous contributions to the community and innovation in the field of health administration. Jessica is a native of Hampton Roads and has called Smithfield, Virginia, home for the last 5 years. She enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 sons. Dr. Ehsan Mirza also joins us. Dr. Mirza was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan. He immigrated to the United States in 1993. His wife, Sarah, is also a physician, and the two met during medical school. They have 3 children, 27, 21, and 19. Dr. Mirza's initial training in internal medicine was followed by fellowships in nephrology and critical care. He worked in Rhode Island for 18 years and now with Riverside Health for 2 years. His current position is RHS Service Line Chief of Critical Care and Pulmonary Medicine. In non-clinical aspects, he loves system building processes, radical innovations, and creative status quo disruption transformations. I like that. As well as mentoring up and coming leaders. Personally, Dr. Mirza is an avid photographer, yoga, and health lifestyle practitioner, as well as a globetrotter. He loves to spend time with family and close friends, and he's very interested in learning and working to recognize and solve the issues related to DEI, especially women empowerment, thanks to his daughter, actually. Finally, we have Mark Johnson. Mark is a Senior Vice President and Community Development Manager at SunTrust, now Truist. In his role, Mr. Johnson is responsible for overseeing the community development activities in Hampton Roads, Richmond, and Charlottesville regions of SunTrust, now Truist. An exemplary steward of community service and champion of philanthropic efforts in the Hampton Roads community, he is consistently working to align the bank with charitable organizations and initiatives that promote positive change within the community. Mark's continued efforts have been recognized through several leadership and service awards. In a recent leadership endeavor, Mark was co-chair of the 2019 Hampton Roads UNCF Mayor's Mask Ball in Norfolk, Virginia. More than 450 people attended the event that raised over $160,000 to support scholarship efforts and within the Hampton Roads community. Mark resides in Virginia Beach with his wife and his 2 children. This is our esteemed panel.
Oh my gosh, you said that they have a combined work experience of a century, over a century.
They're seasoned.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did that and not me. You have so much experience. We're so glad to have you all with us tonight to share your experiences with us and to share your knowledge and insights. So the first question that we have tonight for the panel is, what is your definition of diversity and inclusion? And I will ask Jessie Goodrich to start this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Toya. And thank you. I'm really excited to be here with such an accomplished panel. And I think the hardest part of this was the introductions. I think answering the questions is going to be the easy part. So thank you for that. This is a really great question. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are definitely buzzwords in the workplace right now. And anytime anything is quote unquote trending, right? Sometimes we don't spend enough time talking or thinking about what it really means. And I think simplistically, we can define diversity as how we are different, and maybe specifically how people are different from us. But I think this feels a bit self-centered, starting from the place of me, right? And we're talking about cultural humility today. So it seems important to think about diversity maybe as what makes us unique versus what makes us different. So focusing on what makes a person unique really, as an individual, shifts that focus from me to them. And I can focus on what makes you, you, and not on what makes you not like me. And I think the more we can focus on trying to understand the uniqueness around us, the better off we are. And you may have heard the definition of equity as being defined as equity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. I think that's a well-heard definition. And I think this definition resonates with people. It's easy to understand, right? But I do think it's missing something. Both of those definitions are passive, right? Someone else is asking you to the party and someone else is asking you to dance. And I think inclusion really happens when we feel like we can dance without being asked, right? As individuals, we feel comfortable in the spaces that we inhabit, whether those are workspaces or social spaces, to speak up. Inclusion and psychological safety really go hand in hand. And our job as leaders in our workplaces and in our communities is to make the spaces that we inhabit safe enough for people to feel comfortable to dance without being asked.
Thank you so much. That was a great analogy that you used about dancing. And, you know, I like to say there are different letters that are being used right now. So I want to make sure that we get the context of that as well. A lot of people have heard of JEDI, which the J is for justice. So it's justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we have DEIBA, which is DEIBA. So the B is for belonging, the A is for access. And I like that analogy that you use because to me, the belonging part of it in correlation to the psychological safety that you mentioned, Jesse, is being comfortable or feeling safe telling people that I can't even dance and not feeling judged, you know. So I love that analogy. I use it myself all the time. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the point about the letters too. Another A is accessibility that you begin to hear a lot about as well. Okay. All right. So we have our next question, and we're going to ask our panelists to tap into their personal lives. And Jessica, this question is going to be directed to you, but remember, we do open it to the panelists as well. When you think about diversity, what is your first memory of when you experience a barrier, challenge, or opportunity?
Thank you, Vidal and Toya. Thank you both for inviting me to be a part of this panel. You know, I'm not sure that I have one single memory that I can recall, but I can recall many internal conversations with myself about being different at a young age. I come from a Hispanic family. My grandparents came to this country from Colombia and also from Puerto Rico. And while I come from a very hardworking family, I was the first person in my family to graduate with a college degree. You know, my family always wanted more for me than what they had for themselves. And that in itself made me realize that I was going to have to work really hard for anything that I wanted in life. You know, coming from a different background with not as many opportunities as, say, some of my peers or some of my classmates, you know, I knew I was going to have to make those opportunities on my own. And I can recall doubting myself even as a young adult, you know, entering into the workforce thinking that, you know, although I had the same credentials and the same education as, you know, let's just say, you know, a white male who was my peer, I felt like I had to work harder to prove myself, to prove that I was capable of doing, you know, a good job or, you know, if not a better job. I can recall times where it felt like what I was saying didn't matter or that I wasn't being taken serious or that I just didn't fit in. You know, and honestly, those barriers can be incredibly difficult to overcome. But as I've grown and as I've become more comfortable in the DEI space, I fully believe that being diverse and diversity is an asset. And those of us who have different backgrounds are, you know, of a different race, a different age, a different gender, sexual orientation, whatever it may be, we all deserve a seat at the table. You know, the world is a melting pot and it's changing fast. And so, you know, while there was a point in my life where I doubted or questioned my capabilities based on my background and who I was, you know, or who I am, now I fully embrace and recognize that my differences are actually my strengths.
Sharing that, I just wonder if any of the other panelists have a response to that question. But as you're thinking about responding to that, you brought up an interesting point, Jessica, what is called imposter syndrome. So, you know, that feeling that you don't belong or that you don't measure up, you're not good enough, some of that is perceived and some of it is you know, outward. Yeah. It's what you're receiving back from others. Yeah. So yeah, imposter syndrome is real. And you know, I just want to say, no matter what level of leadership you're in, I don't care if you're the CEO, I've heard from CEOs that they've doubted themselves. So it's not something that you're alone in. we all feel that from time to time.
Yeah, and I appreciate that eventually we at least found a term to even describe what we were feeling. Because I heard in your story too, I'm first generation, number of things. But just recognizing how there's sometimes guilt associated with sometimes progressing and accessing things. And so I appreciate your bringing that forward in your story. But also any others that would like to share, would definitely welcome you at this time.
Dr. Mirza.
Yeah.
For having me over here. This is an extremely important topic. Um, there are two events, I think, in my life that were pivotal. One was 9/11. Now, being an immigrant and a Muslim, um, FBI visited my house in Rhode Island. And the reason they visited is that somebody said that this person looks like one of them. And so we had an FBI agent and four marshals, U.S. marshals, at our doorstep a Saturday morning. I was a fellow in critical care, and I was post call, and everything else is pretty much of a blur. And the amount of information they had on me meant that they had done their homework on me. So that was one instance, and that made me obviously very disturbed, and all of us went, off the grid. And that made me kind of realize and think that what really is going on here. And I was asked to do a TED talk in Providence. In preparation for TED talk about this issue, I realized that as much as I was disturbed by the fact that I was profiled, I myself was profiling everybody else. And that was an amazing revelation for me, because I thought I was a very unbiased kind of a person. But the premise of me profiling other people came from the media that was projecting people where I was growing up in Pakistan. And that influence is amazing, whether it be for the Latino people of Latino background, how media portrays them in the movies, or Italian Americans, Italians, Godfather, for example, or people of African origin. I'm like, if you really think how they are being portrayed, for somebody who has never met these people, it's an amazing amount of brainwashing. So that was a very, very disturbing experience for me, and I've obviously grown out of that, and I've had tremendous mentors of all backgrounds. But it is important for me, and I hope some of you will understand that it's not just you are being profiled and you are being put down. We need to think, how are we doing it to other people as well?
Sharing that, and we're going to come to Dr. Blow next, but I just want to tell you, Dr. Mirza, you are a tremendous inspiration. You have been for me since I've been at Riverside. You're such an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and especially the empowerment of women, which I noticed you put in your bio. You live it every day, and we so appreciate that. Dr. Blow.
Dr. Mirza, you're going to be my next best friend, because that was one heck of a testimony. I want to respond to two things. I'm going to try to be brief, because this is an important conversation. So the first question about diversity: every single one of us, without indictment, without trying to slap you on the wrist, has prejudgments, has prejudged someone, has some point of view, based on history or whatnot, of how you feel about certain things. Whether you think, oh, Italians can really cook, or let me try to think of another analogy. Black guys can really play football. Whatever it is, the thing that I hope we embrace is that we push ourselves to take it to the next level, and then have enough awareness to say, okay, that person may be a different skin complexion from me, or they may be the same as me, but we are different in other ways. I often talk about the dimensions of diversity, and I use this as an example. Even I'm a married Black woman. And my sister is with children, I might add, and my sister is an unmarried Black woman. Her life experiences are like my mother-in-law's gone on used to say, are as different as chalk and cheese, meaning we are two Black women, but we have very different lived experiences. That is what embracing DEI means. Doesn't mean to say that just because you're Black, you're monolithic and everybody's alike. I may be more like Ms. Goodrich than I am for my sister. I mean, and we look very different. Second thing I want to say real quickly to the question that was asked. The first time I really felt, I tell people I've been Black all my life. That's like I had a choice, right? But I was working right out of college in the world headquarters of Caterpillar Incorporated based in Peoria, Illinois. And I will never forget this experience because it's more about this guy than it was me. I have grown up in the South my entire life. And when I moved to Illinois, the very first time I heard a white person use the N-word in my presence, and I had to go all the way to Illinois at the age of 23. And we are kind of raised to be these tough chicks and you can handle it, you can take it. I don't have to run away and start crying and I can give as good as I get. But when I came back and told my boss, he was furious. I said, I handled it. I told him what I needed to tell him and it didn't bother me, I thought. But, sometime later I reflected on it and said, oh my God, there are people in this world that actually think like that. And it made me very sad. So.
For sharing that, Dr. Blow. I can say my childhood, I did not have to go all the way across the country to hear that word. But one thing that I always tell people, and I think those who have experienced it realize it, such as yourself, Dr. Blow, is that whether you hear that word or another offensive word, or it comes out in action, whereas the person is being biased or discriminatory, it is trauma. Mm-hmm. It's trauma, and it's something that you carry with you and you need to deal with. So in terms of mental health, we should keep that in mind and make sure that we are talking about it with someone, a loved one, a counselor, or someone, because it is trauma.
Yeah. And the piece that I appreciate in all the comments is this reflective piece. You had an experience that was challenging to you, that minimized you, relegated you in some way. But even in that experience, I'm learning more about myself. And it's equipping me to kind of deal with new situations or just engage, particularly as a focus today, workplace experiences, different types of personalities, just a number of things. And so it's fascinating that even with that trauma and that pain and those incidents, they still equipped us in some way. Yeah. And I know it's sometimes very tricky to kind of find kind of the gold within those different experiences, but they definitely can be there, particularly with that reflective piece. Yeah.
Yes, and one thing that I learned is that our EAP actually covers that type of trauma, so kudos to Riverside. So our next question actually is a good, what we just discussed is a good lead-in. And so I want to ask Dr. Oshiki, have you been in a situation or witnessed a situation where you or someone else felt culturally devalued? We've heard some of that here already, but tell us about an experience you've had like that, or where you unintentionally offended someone culturally. How did you handle that situation, Dr. Oshiki?
Thanks, Toya, for that question and for having me here tonight and letting me be a part of this panel. I really appreciate the comments from my colleagues on the panel, and I want to build on that. And I'm actually going to answer both of those questions and examples. So for me, my first sort of experience of that differentness that Dr. Blow alluded to, that the prejudgment, the things that we all go into. So as a young, I started my Army career before I went into medicine as a tank officer, as an armored cavalry officer. And, there are many stereotypes of young second lieutenants fresh in the Army and ready to go out there and do things. And they come in all gung ho and all that. And so, that's you're trying to break that stereotype of being, that new guy coming in. And I overheard the men in my platoon talking about, yeah. So this is in the mid '80s, not long after the end of the Vietnam War, and so there's I heard them talking about Lieutenant Buckethead, and so Buckethead is as a derogatory term referring to Asians from the conical hats that Asians wear, and it was very commonly used as a derisive term in Vietnam. And so not only was I being sort of profiled as that lieutenant, but also as a Japanese American, I was being profiled in this Asian thing. So I was thinking of my difference as being as an officer amongst these enlisted soldiers. Yeah, they saw not just that; they also saw the Asianness. So coming out of that, I'm thinking, that we are all soldiers. We all wear a uniform that says U.S. Army on it. That's a unifying thing. And an expression I heard in the aftermath of all this from my very experienced platoon sergeant, he says, "You know what, sir? We're all soldiers. We're all Army green. I don't see black, white, brown. I see green. I see soldier." I thought, okay, that's kind of a good that's kind of a good way to see it. We're all that equality. Okay, so fast forward to the summer of 2020. And I'm commanding a large hospital in El Paso, Texas, and in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, we're having a DEI roundtable, having some candid discussions about everything that was going on, and that subject of being colorblind, just seeing Army green, and came up. And there's an African American soldier who said, "Sir, I have a problem with that." I'm like, "Whoa, talk to me." And she said, "When someone says that they don't see me, they don't see the color of my skin, all they see is the rank on my collar, that misses everything that I have been through as a Black woman in the U.S. Army. It ignores the fact that," and she goes on to explain, "I was married to a white man for 7 years. I was horribly treated by his family. I was marginalized. They would not, they tried to separate my children from me because they didn't want them to be influenced, by by their mother and all of her culture." She had a horrible experience from that. And she said, when someone says they're colorblind, they are missing all that. They don't see that. And I feel devalued and completely unseen as a result of, if the only thing you see about me is the rank, then you're missing who I am. And I thought, wow, okay, that's a lesson for me that I need to step back from my own implicit bias of wanting to be included and seen as a soldier and not being seen for my racial background. I missed that, in doing that, I could discount someone else's racial background. So that was a very powerful lesson for me.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
It is, and what I got from what you told me is that the strategy that you used was really just a human characteristic quality of being, humble and listening, and then that self-evaluation.
I think the other piece that's fascinating too, and I saw you, Dr. Glow, and I'll be very quick with it, comment. What I appreciate too is that how you can still hold your understanding and belief while still honoring someone else's, particularly when a new perspective is introduced to you. And even with coming with that bias, I think many times, particularly when we talk about bias, implicit bias, even microaggressions, et cetera, that there's an assumption that we have to adopt someone else's understanding, their own feelings, et cetera. But really within this work, part of humility is just honoring where individuals may be, even if they're from a different place, and honor the unique experiences that they actually have. And so I appreciate your highlighting that, particularly in that soldier story.
So it looks like we're going to Mark next.
Yeah, I saw Dr. Blau saying, so I didn't know if she.
Oh, Dr. Blow, you have a comment?
Yeah, I have to respond to the first part of the question you articulated, which was what has happened, but where have we transgressed? And this is my moment, and it's hopefully a teachable moment for someone else. And what I hope when I share this, because it's a very personal and private thing, that we learn to give each other grace. We do not get it right 100% of the time. And so this is what happened. I made a faux pas as it relates to fully understanding the LGBTQ plus community. And I used a term that one term I thought was bad, another term I thought was good. So queer I thought was bad, and flaming I thought was good. And in that, someone said to me, Felicia, you offended me. It was a small group. And I was trying to articulate, and I hear it all the time. And just like the buckethead thing, I never heard of that, Dr. Oshiki. So one of the other things, you could use it as a pejorative, and some people don't even know what you're talking about. So what I did with that experience, I apologized in the moment. And then here's what else I did. I took a LinkedIn Learning course to help better educate me on these terms. And the one thing that I will tell you about, particularly the LGBTQ plus community, it is constantly evolving. And for people of a certain age, and maybe younger ones, it's just not as in front of you as it perhaps it is. It's not an excuse, but the reason I'm sharing is I didn't get offended. I was mortally sorry. I apologized, and I tried to take action because I fully believe I'm an ally, a strong ally to the LGBTQ plus community, and I did not want that to be what folks thought of me. The last thing I'll say is this cancel culture. We have got to figure out a way to overcome this, because tomorrow, maybe even before this conversation ends today, somebody's going to do something wrong. So you don't put the smack down on them and label them, but you bring people along. So I'll shut up.
Such good points. Vidal,
They
did you
do.
want to comment?
Well, I was going to say, Mark, we've actually set you up, with the question that's coming at you. Because, again, not only just exploring these different challenging situations related to different or unique experiences, even challenges related to just history and trauma. So, Mark, how do we all handle these situations in a kind, respectful, grace came up, so graceful manner so that we can all grow from them? How can we grow from these instances, honoring that humility?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the question, the part about, so how can we grow from these experiences, these interpersonal actions? Dr. Blow really hit it on the head when she basically said, I made a mistake, and looked at opportunities to better herself in her actions moving forward. And I just thought about those words, growth. How do I better myself? Just to kind of give some context, I'm a fan of humanity. And so I know with the certain definitions and things of that nature we talk about, diversity, inclusion, et cetera, I'm part of that humanity crew that talks about no matter who you are, you're still human. And I think I got that from my grandfather. Back in the 30s, there was a number of people who migrated up during Jim Crow and before that to Long Island, New York, where I grew up. And so, my grandfather was part of that ilk where a lot of the men never looked up when they shook your hand. And I watched this. He worked in the field at a potato farm for majority of his life. He probably only had a shucks third grade, fourth grade education, and so for me, I saw him over a period of time, just trying to get a sense of I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a black man, and I want to count, I want to matter, and towards the end of his life, he spoke more than he did when I was a young kid, but I used that to say I kind of gleaned from that in terms of how I evolved as a young man, and so we all talk about these different experiences from college to the workplace, etc., and coming in contact with individuals and institutions that you know where you stand. I kind of use that kind of as my fuel to say, hey, you might not think that much of me because of the color of my skin or what you think about our community as a whole, but I'm not going to let that stop me from progressing and getting better, not just from a workplace standpoint, but as a human being. I think that many times when we feel offended, we tend to think solely about what the other person needs to hear or learn. And we don't consider that we all have areas that we need to grow, learn, and listen. And I think if you want to be heard, it's important to listen first. There's I think a biblical principle that talks about be swift to hear and slow to speak. Because sometimes it can be uncomfortable to not be heard and to speak, formulating an opinion before you listen. So I try to do that. I'm excited and proud to work for an organization, Truist, that's a part of their purpose, mission, and values. And one of them is trustworthy. And if you're trustworthy, you're honest and yet humble and gracious in your approach. And one of our values is caring. Everyone matters regardless of their perspective. And so when it comes to that mindset, how do you create environments of learning and an environment where people feel a sense of joy and happiness? Because we all know in environments where there's positivity, people do their best work. And so in closing, I had one of my first mentors and coaches. She was hard as heck on me. But now as I mature, I'm learning so much. And she said, Mark, there's two things I need you to do in your life that you will always be and be considered a better person. Let your work go before you and leave a place better than it was before when you got there. And so there are some situations and individuals in life, people may never like you. They may never give you kudos. They will never respect you. But the humanity in me always believes that if I keep being who I am and who I was destined and purposed to be, I wasn't called to everybody. I was called to somebody or a group of folk that based upon who I am and how I treat people, they will be impacted by that and they will treat people with kindness and respect.
Mark, you had a lot, man, in there.
Yes, yes you did. And thank you for sharing that, Mark. Gosh, you took me way back to the potato fields. My mom worked in the potato fields and her brothers and sisters. Wow, so I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it actually, again, is a good lead into the next question, which is for Dr. Blow. And that question is, what strategies do you use for developing innovative, diverse teams? Because who we are, we don't cut off when we come into the workplace, or in your case, into the school or the college. We bring who we are to the workplace, so we're all diverse in our own right. How do you bring that diversity together to create those diverse and innovative teams?
Well, I kind of go back to what I said earlier, these dimensions of diversity. That's the first thing, to recognize that it's not all black, brown, white. There are all these many different dimensions, age, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, marital status, ability, education, how you engage with someone that has a PhD, as an example, may be different than you do so with someone that has, a different level of education. You have to meet people where they are. So the thing, no race is monolithic. That is the thing we have to remember. So when you're recruiting, we all have a bias to look to people that look like us. It's called affinity bias, where you lean towards somebody that's in your same sorority, in your same club, in your same church, that lives in your neighborhood. The thing that I have done, now Hampton is a different animal. We are an HBCU. 90 to 95% of the student population is African American or mixed race with part African American. It is the first place I've ever worked in my history of working where race is never a concern for me. That's saying something, because everywhere else I've worked, and I'm going to get back to the core of your question, but this is something I want people to think about. This is the world Mark was alluding to, we're trying to get to. When you walk in a room, you make a presentation, you leave the room, you start thinking about, how did I do? What do they think? Here at Hampton, when I make a presentation, never do I have to ask, I wonder, were they concerned about my race? I wonder, did they like my hair? I wonder, and it's so gratifying, but it's not the real world, because I have lots of experiences outside of Hampton. And so I'm going to reflect when I was a people leader at other organizations and the kinds of things that you have to actively do when you're recruiting talent. Go outside your network. Meaning, if you are a member of the Rotary Club, think about going, now I don't even know if they still exist, the JCs. Secondly, talk to people and engage with people on purpose consistently who do not look like you. Said differently, if everybody in my circle is a Black woman of a certain age, I'm doing myself and my organization a disservice. It takes hard work. The other thing is, let your assets, your website, your social media, speak to your DE&I values. What I mean by that, if your Facebook page, if your website, if your Instagram all looks homogenous in terms of the age, race of a person, what does that say to a person who's not that age, race, ethnicity? It says, okay, there's not a place for me there. So I could go on and on in terms of what we can actively do as leaders, as community folks in the community, to go outside our networks, and maybe not even just for a position, not to hire, but to enhance our own being. I love, like Mark, oh my God, I hope we get to that. We got DEI, we got Jedi, we got belonging, so maybe the next iteration is human. We're all human. We all breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Right, Dr. Ashiki, did I get that right? So if we start thinking about ourselves in that way, love covers a multitude of sins. So I know I went on and on, but that's my 2 cents.
No, it's okay. I'm hearing a couple of different perspectives here. I mean, you're saying we should all love each other. We should all think of ourselves as human, which we all are. But I also go back to the point that Dr. Ashiki was making about being colorblind. And so when we are operating from that state of mind, we are not taking into account the unique experiences of certain groups. So how, it's a challenge. I mean, even for me, for all of us that work in this DEI space, it's a challenge. How do you merge those two?
Yeah.
How do you recognize the differences, the unique experiences and challenges, but at the same time, promote that spirit of love and humanity. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah, and the piece that's coming to mind for me, and my HR colleagues will definitely appreciate this, navigating all of that and still under the umbrella and the structure of an organization, having functions, et cetera. You know, so here you have all these different unique identities that exist, all the different challenges related to that, but we're Riverside, we're Hampton, we're Truist, we're Christopher Newport. You know, we have things to produce. And so even having those goals, having those different structures, having different politics that are related to that, and how do we weave all those additional layers related to not just engaging individuals so they're comfortable, but you're also engaging individuals to be comfortable and productive in their work. So just another layer that's so fascinating about this whole DEI component. And I appreciate particularly, I heard this a little bit in Mark and also Felicia when you brought up DEIB, et cetera,
Yeah.
all these different acronyms. Well, the thing is, if we're to gather again probably next year, the next couple of years, these terms will evolve.
There will be more letters.
And so what will be next? And I think what sometimes worries me is that many times we're not able to talk about these core issues because we're caught up in what is the correct or current or trendy language related to this when there are human elements that are actually involved. So I really appreciate some of those pieces.
Thank you, Dr. Ashiki. I see the thumbs up.
All right, so we're going to get on to our next question. And our Dr. Mirza, this is going to be directed to you, but also, again, we invite in any other panelists to respond to this. So how do we get our organizations, including leadership teams, on board with DEI initiatives? So how do we, as organizations, within our organizations, including leadership teams, get them on board with DEI initiatives?
So this is not an easy task, and I tell you why. I think in Urdu, I translate it in English, and it comes out of my mouth. And I hope and pray to God that whatever is coming out is being received on the other side in the same way as I'm thinking in Urdu. Okay? So this is just my personal experience. Okay? Now, in my division, I've got people, men and women, Nepal, India, Long Island, Denver, Colorado, Pakistan, Nigeria. Okay? Of them, some are women, some are men. They have the differences of, as was told earlier, of being raised differently, definitely raised differently as a XY chromosome, i.e. man, and raised differently as XX chromosome as a female, a woman, in a completely different, diverse backgrounds. So as a leader, for me, it is a challenge for me to understand where is this coming from. And as a leader, you have to spend time with your people to understand where that thing came from. It may not be malicious at all. It might be just the way they say things. But it is up to me how I received it. I had my morning coffee. Is my patient doing okay? When that was brought in and I'm distracted and I'm multitasking, it's a matter of reception and delivery. So it's not that easy thing to do. I think Dr. Blow correctly said that you need to have that grace to just move beside the way it was said and get into the content of the discussion. But what does it actually mean? It is a very, very difficult task to do, but in order for it to be done, the leadership from the top down has to believe in this concept. There is no and if or but about it. And any change that you want to bring at any level in any organization, the leadership has to lead that charge. Because once the leadership is in front, they're first on the field and last to leave, and they leave no one behind, then everybody falls in line. And then people who are not of the same mindset get sidelined pretty quickly. So that is a very, very important task. And another thing, I think my children are my teachers. Talk about the alphabets behind LGBTQ. Every single time I'm saying this, my kids are horrified what I'm saying, and they're adding alphabets, and I can't keep up. And I can't keep up because I have to learn medicine and I have to learn other things, and then the political correctness of all this going on. And we occasionally have heated arguments or dinner table that what do you want me to do? So I personally think, and if I had a magic wand, and I think I will try with our organization as well, is maybe we should have a shadow board with young up and coming employees of the organization that are a different generation altogether. So their level of understanding of the issues are way different than my level of understanding. If my children were on a board with me and they're constantly correcting me, no, we can't say that. This is not cool. And they will help me evolve, but actually make my decisions and my projection of whatever I'm trying to do better. And I think involving younger people and moving sort of away from the legacy mindset of being always in the front and expecting them to express on the behalf of organizations, especially in the DEI world, is extremely difficult. Think about it for a second. You are a DEI representative in a boardroom, and your chairperson is saying something that is ridiculous but not politically correct. And can you correct that person, that chairperson, your boss or your boss's boss? That's difficult. But in order for this to happen, I think there has to be multiple layer of people who teach multiple layer of people that what could be said and should be said. That I think may work out, but difficult task. But we have to invest in this.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza. That's
that.
so true. And I saw heads nodding when you were saying you learn from your children, and I'm one of them. I learn a lot from my 21 and 17-year-old. So yes, I see Dr. Blow nodding, Dr. Ushiki. Fidel?
Yeah, and the point of what I appreciate too is kind of we have to set the stage, set the climate, for a lot of that growth. Because not only with the youth, as you mentioned, which I appreciated, but also for our leaders, being able to provide that education up, down, sideways, however your organization exists. But going back to the point of humanity, isn't it tough that many times we'll look at our leaders who we expect to have this certain level of knowledge, to have this certain level of experience, but we may not provide them grace because they're situated differently. We're in those positions, and so as we're serving other individuals within our organization or within our community, it's something about where we're situated. And where grace and understanding is attached. So I appreciate particularly the comments about leaders and even how we can assist them with having a deeper understanding of this work as well.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Dr. Blow's comments about saying something and not realizing how it offended someone, because we may work in this space, but we need grace too. I mean, it's a ever-changing culture, and things change just at the drop of a dime, and we have to stay abreast of it. But we can make mistakes. I mean, leaders make mistakes all the time, but we need grace as well. I mean, every individual, no matter what leadership level, needs that grace, and we should all operate in that.
Being human.
So we have about 6 questions from students from Hampton and Christopher Newport, and I'm not sure that we'll get to all of them, but we're going to certainly try. Gotcha. So do you want to cue up the first one?
Yeah. So the first question, and Dr. Mirza, we're actually going to ask if you could respond to this one. We'll receive a question from Bryce Kimbrough, who's a senior at Hampton University. So let's take a look.
My name is Bryce Kimbrough. I'm a senior sports management major here at Hampton University from Houston, Texas. There are a lot of definitions of DEI. Can you explain for our students here today so that they have a clear context of what it is and why it's important?
All right. So Dr. Mirza, if you would, answer the video question, specifically as relates to equity that I know may have been a part of the conversation.
So again, the word DEI in my mind likely will be different than DEI of a student from college. I'm pretty certain of that. But diversity to me is celebrating what you are not, i.e., what somebody else is. And we talked about it earlier, is that I'm a physician and I'm a science biology major. Diversity is the differences in the DNAs that, when come together, it strengthens your eventual DNA. It is something that when you bring together, it's not the same, it's different. But when we work in a medicine, when we combine differences, different types of DNAs, we become strong. So in my mind, and as Dr. Oshige said, I went similarly to exactly the same thing. There was a phase in my life when I wanted to be colorblind. And then I realized that that is probably not the wise thing, because nature did not want us to be the same thing. It was not designed that way, just for the fact that we have to evolve and become stronger. Than those people or beings or DNA that does not evolve die out. So diversity is a strength. That's how I look at it. Inclusivity, I look at is that humanity aspect that we're talking about. It's irrelevant who you are or where you are from. You are a human being. We breathe oxygen. We exhale carbon dioxide. We bleed red, and that's about it. So that ability to go and give anybody a hug, as long as they're not hurting you, that is inclusivity in its core. That you can accept the other person no matter how they look, uh, as long as obviously they're not hurting you. That is inclusivity. So in my opinion, basically, I in my life try, and in my professional life as well as personal life, I kind of see beyond a person's differences, but I also look at their differences and put it in my team and put them in my team in such a way that their strengths kind of plug the holes of the weaknesses of the other team members, and it sort of becomes a perfect team. And that's how I try to bypass this DEI dilemma that people have. I am very much in favor of accepting people's differences and utilizing their strengths to the strength of my team and my organization.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Mirza. I always, when it comes to equity, there's this diagram that I shared internally with my team at Riverside, where, there were three people. They were trying to see a baseball game, and on one side it said equality. All of them got, one level to see over this fence at the baseball game. But of course, depending on your height, you could see over it or you couldn't. And then there's a picture of equity. And some had one box to stand on, some had two, some had three. But really that whole concept of equity is making sure that you are paying attention to unique challenges and that you're addressing those challenges so that we all are on the same, level to be able to move forward and progress.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the next question. We received a question from Taylor McCullum, a freshman at Hampton University.
Hello, my name is Taylor McCullum. I'm a first-year journalism major from Portland, Oregon. What advice do you have for HBCU students as they plan to enter a world that looks very different from their college campuses?
All right, so we're going to ask Mark Johnson to answer this question.
I was biting at the bit. I was saying, man, call me, answer those questions. So I'm going to tell you what I tell my children. Build your team. Build your village. They used to tell me when I was in college that college was a microcosm of the real world, and its scenarios provided you with kind of a some insight into what you were going to have to deal with when you got out into the real world. But you never do life alone. You build your village, because your village will basically be able to support you and undergird you when you're going through some of these tough things, when you're trying to process things that you can never basically do it by yourself. And so I think that's one of the things, unfortunately, that a lot of young people in our community don't do, because in the world we live in, it's very, I think there's a concept that talks about you can be independent or you can be interdependent. I believe in interdependence in terms of this world now, because of social media and because a lot of young people unfortunately have grown up in different communities and different families than we have. And so they've had to pull their own bootstraps up, or at least, based upon their situations. And I think it's important in the world we live in and moving forward that you really build your support and encouragement base. I would not be where I am personally and professionally if I didn't have many people who I've come across and been connected with in my life that have taken punches for me, and not so much for performance, but just because of positioning me to be able to be exposed and have access to better opportunities to put myself in, as well as when I put myself in the better opportunities, I bring my family along as well. So I think that's the strength. The strength is, the first part of wisdom is to know that certain things you're ignorant. And when you understand that and understand that there's certain things that you can't do alone, and you start bringing people who want to see you win, who have peeked into your future, you're on your way to success.
Yes. Thank you for that, Mark. Dr. Blow has a question or a comment.
So I guess I want to put it to her question is girding herself up to enter a world that will be more difficult than her Hampton College experience by virtue of one thing and one thing only. She has been in an environment where, as I said earlier, race is not an issue for the most part. If you screw up on an exam and you get a bad grade, you don't have to worry about, was this teacher profiling me? So personally, I do think we need to acculturate HBCU students the same way PWIs need to help, embrace DEI on their campuses where there may be majority communities. There's a big world that we're going to go out into, that she's going to go out into. You have to embrace the fact that differences are great. They make our organizations stronger, better, and you personally will improve. But recognize that you have to lean into that and don't get scared of it. Meaning, don't get worried, well, I don't see anybody. I mean, just think about it, really. Just think about it. Any of us who went from our homes and our churches or places of worship, and then we start going other places or got our first job. There are probably a lot of people around the table that didn't really look like us. So what do you tell a young person? Lean in. Recognize that people are going to be different. Seek to understand, then be understood. Stephen Covey said it best. And don't be afraid of the differences. So that's what I would tell that young lady, in addition to what Mark shared.
So I'd like to stay here for a minute. Sure. Because you bring up some good points, Dr. Blow. One of them that I think deserves more conversation, and I'm hoping that our panelists will chime in here, and Vidal as well. when you talk about being at an HBCU, which I graduated from an HBCU. My undergrad is from Norfolk State, the Norfolk State University. I'm repping the Riverside color, but also the Norfolk State color today. So when I was on that campus, there were certain differences that I saw at my university from what my sister saw, who went to Georgetown, which was a PWI. Some of those differences were the way that the professors embrace you. The class to student or professor to student ratio was a lot better. So I got that customized support that I needed and that motivation. But I would say in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, there were situations at an HBCU that I experienced in the workplace and anywhere else in the world, because there are challenges even within the groups. So although I'm a Black woman, I experience colorism. I have experienced colorism within the Black race. So, as well as I've experienced unity. Right? But there are challenges even on HBCU campuses when it comes to race and ethnicity as well. So in terms of preparation, and then I'll give it to someone else that wants to chime in here. In terms of preparation, I think we get a lot of that at home. I mean, my mother, I watched the way, as I was growing up, the way that she dealt with those challenges at work, in the community. I mentioned earlier, as a child, at only 8 years old, I experienced the N-word, and it was traumatic. But I watched and observed the way that my mother handled that situation, and she handled it with complete dignity. In fact, I was upset. I was like, wait, I want you to tell this person off because they called me this word. And she was extremely dignified and handled it in the way that she probably should have handled it. But I watched that. I observed her at work and the challenges that she had at work and how she moved and operated. So I think a lot of that preparation we get from our parents, from mentors and so on and so forth. But I think as an organization, we can help with that preparation through the training and development and mentoring programs that we have.
And you hit on a couple of points too that I want to bring forward as well. So my experience was different. So I went to a school in Middle Tennessee, predominantly white, but there it was going again to that place of finding multiple tribes. So we have these places where we can go and we can gather, but also around interest and engagement. But the other piece that I really appreciate about it, again, so I'm stepping out into this new experience, country boy, first gen, family didn't really know about this college experience. I kind of thought it was like an extension of high school. But stepping into that place of experiencing difference, but not having language related to it, twofold. We didn't talk about it at home. We saw things, we saw interactions, but we didn't have language. We're coming now with this such academic vocabulary, that we can define these different things. But that wasn't the situation at home. So even it's this unsaid that I'm seeing how people are engaging. I know this isn't right, but what is that? But how empowering it is to enter a space where you are now attaching language and labels to your own experiences, and being able to describe even what you're seeing in others. I think it's really fascinating for us and also critically important for us if we're to really talk and engage and communicate, across these differences. Yeah, and so I know the panelists biting, what is it called? Biting at the bit? Chomping at the bit.
No, they're not. So let's go on to.
No, those hands are going. You see.
Okay, so I have Oshiki, Dr. Oshiki.
So yeah, I have a little bit different experience of colorism. So I did my undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, which it's probably beyond a PWI. I'd call it a VWI, because it was very, very white, and it was but interestingly, there was a very substantial, one of the largest non-white communities were Asians, because it had a great engineering school. So we had a lot of Chinese, Korean, Asian students that would come there for the engineering education. So in my freshman year, I had a student from Wisconsin say, "Wow, you speak English really well. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I'm thinking, well, thank you so much, because, it's kind of my native language. That was, and then I had a Chinese roommate who said, I'm mixed race. So my mom is from Wisconsin, which is part of how I ended up there, German, Norwegian, and my dad's Japanese. So my Chinese roommate says, man, you're just a Twinkie. You're yellow on the outside, but you're white on the inside. And I'm like, okay. So I'm not yellow enough for my Chinese roommate, and but I speak English very well amongst the Wisconsin folks. So it was a very interesting space to be in. But the discussion about colorism, I thought, was manifest in many different ways.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard the Twinkie thing. I've heard the Oreo thing, black on the outside, white on the inside.
Or banana as well. Yep.
Yeah, I've never heard that one. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess I'm queuing up this one. Are we gonna?
I'm just checking if we still got time.
Yeah, we're good on time.
We're good. Okay.
We can see another student video. This one is Mr. Sawal Lawal, senior at Christopher Newport University.
Hello, my name is Salam Lawal, and I'm a senior and majoring in information science at Christopher Newport University. My question for the panel is, as the social and political climate has become more tense over the past 2 to 3 years, how have you had to adjust your approaches to diversity and inclusion initiatives? Has anything changed for you and your organization? Thank you.
And Jesse, we're hoping that you would touch on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So it's a great question. And I think Dr. Mirza had a question earlier about how can we get leadership to embrace DEI initiatives. And I think maybe we not have initiatives would be a starting point for that. So I think initiatives imply a start and a stop, right? They apply that you're going to start doing something and then at some point it will end. And I think DEI really should be embedded in everything your organization does every day. Not a separate set of programs and initiatives. So if you have leadership development, DEI should be part of your leadership development. You shouldn't have a separate track, right, of diversity education. That being said, I do think the events and climate over the last several years have made it clear how important it is to have an expert in that DEI space, really helping to embed those best practices within the organization and helping us see where we have blind spots or things that we haven't thought of. And that's the exact reason that we hired a chief diversity officer almost exactly 2 years ago, right, Toya? So Toya is our chief diversity officer at Riverside, and she does a great job with that, of helping us think about where we have opportunity to invite people to the conversation, maybe that haven't historically been invited to the conversation, or think about things in a different way, or add education around diversity or cultural competence, all the things that we've talked about today as being so important in how we move all of this forward. I mean, we haven't used the term cultural competence, I don't think yet, but I think that's what a lot of people have talked about on the panel, is how do we really develop our own skills related to under people. And one of the ways we do that is education, but the other way is through relationship, right? It's through knowing people that are different than us. And I think Dr. Blow really emphasized that. So I'll also just add that I'm incredibly fortunate to work for an organization that has a mission that's very aligned with what I believe to be at the heart of diversity and inclusion, and that's caring for others as we would care for those we love. So I think if you start there, it's pretty hard to get it wrong.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for those comments, Jesse. I guess you're queuing up the next one. We should probably get to these videos.
Yeah.
We have so many.
So our next question, we received a question from Nia Dempsey, who's a sophomore at Hampton University. Let's take a look.
Hi everyone, my name is Nia Dancy. I'm a second-year psychology major with a double minor in leadership studies and English from Charlotte, North Carolina. And my question is, what is the biggest mistake organizations make regarding diversity and inclusion that we should be on guard for?
All right, and this one is for Dr. Oshiki.
That's a great question that Nia brings up. And I think if you had a quick answer, it would be don't do the things that Jesse said. That's the biggest mistake you could make, because what Jesse was describing is good. And I think a big mistake that organizations make is they don't really do the deep thinking and deep consideration about DEI, and they do those initiatives where they sprinkle a little DEI on that, and that'll make it all good. They're superficial or they're well-intentioned but misguided. And we see a number of examples of this. There was a very high-powered accounting firm on the East Coast that had they did a very vocal, public-facing PR campaign for their DEI program, but it did not match what was going on with their internal audience. And there was not an environment of psychological safety for employees within the organization. And they experienced a significant exodus of staff who were people of color or in the LGBTQ community. They left in droves because they saw that dichotomy between the public face and what was going on in that organizational culture. We've seen ad campaigns from companies that, it's Pride Month, so we're just going to put a rainbow banner up on something and call it good. And that's not like Jesse said, it's a cultural shift that we talk about. It's not an initiative. It's not a campaign. It's part of it's how you do business. It's how you see yourself, your customers, your colleagues. It is a mindset, not an initiative. And I think that's the biggest mistake that organizations make when they start looking at DEI.
Wonderful. Yeah. So thanks for those comments. Mark, looks like you wanted to make a comment real quickly.
The other thing, is it okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. I was going to say the other piece with that, I think there's a underestimation of the leadership and business proposition from actually looking at the operation, looking at their strategy and how they operate, and linking DE&I as a part of the overall strategy of the institution. One, because of the thinking and leadership and skill sets that a lot of diverse folk are bringing to the table and bring to the table. And we've seen this in the past. And number two, because of the numbers in the populations that are changing and adding to the economy and adding to education and adding to the different facets of the quote unquote country and lives that we live, you having more people bringing different things together that would add value to the institution. And so my hope is that we continue to have conversations like this. We continue to have people in leadership that think openly and more progressively and bring different facets of people, not just ethically, but in terms of thinking, to the table to basically make decisions for organizations that we work for, that we're a part of.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm just checking time. Do we have enough time for another? We see
We have time for the last one. This is our last question.
So we got to move into the last video question that panelists. I saw, again, you're chomping at the bit. So we received a question from Morgan Lewis, who's a graduating senior at Hampton University. So let's take a look and listen to the question.
1, 2, 3.
Hello everyone, my name is Morgan Lewis. I am a graduating senior biology pre-dental major, leadership studies minor from Charlotte, North Carolina. And my question is, how should diverse students take advantage of the emphasis on DEI? And how can this greater focus on DEI be maximized to its fullest potential for young people of color?
All right. And Jessica, we're asking if you would touch on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great question, Morgan. And my response to that is embrace it. Just think about the conversation that we're having today, right? The world looked a lot different years ago. And the fact that we're so fortunate to be on this panel today with speakers from so many different backgrounds, being very vulnerable and humble in the stories that they're sharing with you, that this is a safe space to do that. And years ago, we wouldn't be able to do that. So I think it's important that we recognize that we have come a long way in the DEI space, but there's still a lot of work to do. Don't let that imposter syndrome get the best of you like it did for me early on in my career. Go after those opportunities that you may have not had before, but also continue taking an active role in representing those who have historically been underrepresented or misrepresented. I think what we've heard a lot of today is DEI and all the other acronyms. They shouldn't just be buzzwords. The changes that we've made and the changes that we'll continue to make, we need to sustain them. And it's going to take, people like Morgan and the rest of the students that we've heard from today, in addition to this panel, and the rest of the world, to really continue to advance those DEI. I won't say initiatives, but sustain DEI, both professionally and socially. And it's going to take all of us to do that. So I really say embrace it.
Thank you, Jessica. We have a comment from Dr. Blow.
It's 30 seconds. You cannot manage what you do not measure. So if we're going to talk about DEI, if we want to talk about transformational change, you must have metrics that demonstrate how you're doing. And I'd love to have a greater conversation on that, but I'm going to stop because we're almost at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Blow. Thank you, Jessica, and to all of our panelists. And to your point, Dr. Blow, there will be more conversations. Right. So you can go to Riverside's website, is riversideonline.com/diversity for more information about upcoming discussions. But such good comments tonight, such good insights. Thank you for taking time away from your loved ones to be with us here tonight. I also want to thank those of you that joined us on social media, on our Facebook and YouTube channels. We have your comments, we have your questions. We will get back to you on those. Please know that you'll get your answers. But thank you so much for joining us. Vidal, any closing remarks?
Absolutely. Thank you, Toya, and thank you, Riverside, for hosting such a wonderful event. I know we could go more and talk more about these wonderful topics, and maybe we can continue the conversation, not only social media, but also in our respective spaces. But I really appreciate being a part of this conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. And Hampton University, Christopher Newport University, Truist, thank you for being with us. Have a good evening.